So let me check because I have a couple of questions sort of ready to answer. Normally, I do these things all text based, so I get the questions in, and from that point on, I basically just answer by email, and we have a team of experts basically, and there's a doctor, there's a nutritionist, there's just a physio, that's me, and it's a total panel of about 4 to 6 different specialists, and we send in the answer to an editor. Basically, they turn it into an article, and that's how it normally works. But the last time I've been, I got so many questions, I can't really keep up with writing. So instead of backtracking all of these different posts, I figured I might as well just do this and answer questions that I still had to answer or been planning to answer. And if there's anything coming up right now, feel free to ask, and I'll answer on the spot. All right, so we're starting off quite specific. Is it a problem? Nick asks, is it a problem if ACL test is being done 4 weeks after a reconstruction? So Nick says, 4 weeks ago, I've had a ACL, so that's the front cruciate ligament of the knee, has been reconstructed. And now the question is, how bad is it if the Lachman test, one of the tests for ACL injuries, is being done 4 weeks after surgery? Okay, so first of all, for the people that don't know, if you're, let me get a little bit of extra light. If you get an ACL reconstruction done, a lot of people think once the reconstruction is done, you're set, you're good to go, you're healed. It's not the case. Still nowadays, even though that surgery techniques have increased significantly, if we compare that to a couple of years back, they would really cut the entire knee open, fold the skin away, and then pretty much go in and start cutting away, so to speak, for lack of better words. Nowadays, almost everything is done by microsurgery. And to give you an idea, the cruciate ligaments are in your knee like this, and they make sure that the upper leg and the lower leg don't have more movement back and forward, respective to one another, to make sure that the integral stability of the joint is good. So you might know that in a lot of professional sports, football, but MMA as well, there's a lot of ACL tears, and typically those are non-contact moments. Imagine somebody coming down from a jump and trying to cut corners. Those are the moments where the knee loses position, and that's where most of the tension ends up on the cruciate ligament, and it's possible for it to snap. Now, what they do with a ACL reconstruction is they go into the knee, they drill a little hole in the tibia and in the femur, and they take a cruciate ligament either from an animal, or they take one of the tendons from the hamstring, for example, from yourself, and they put that into the little tunnel to reconstruct the same sort of structure that the anterior cruciate ligament would normally be like. So they pretty much just reconstruct it. Now, it's important to understand that after the surgery, you're looking at about 6 to 9 months rehab to get back into whatever professional sport you might be playing. The first 2 weeks, you're pretty much dealing with a big, red, swollen knee, and it's just pain and swelling management. There's not really much that you can do. From week number 2 to week number 6, roughly, you'll still be managing pain. You'll be starting to work on range of motion a little bit, but it's very important to realize that the internal stability of the new cruciate ligament that they've put in is not strong yet. So they use a biodegradable screw to lock the new ACL into place. But it takes a significant amount of time for that screw to sort of, it half dissolves, but when the bone your body starts to produce new bone, and it pretty much merges with the screw, so it becomes one. But this can take a long time, and it's often underestimated how quick that specific part is good to go. That doesn't mean you can't do anything. There's actually a lot of things that you can do without putting stress on that particular part. But doing a specific test for the cruciate ligaments, where you're basically pulling on the lower leg to put stress on that structure, that's, in my opinion, not a good idea. Because first of all, the knee is probably still going to be pretty painful 4 weeks in. It's just very likely that there's still swelling in there. If there's swelling in the joint, you have a very low reliability of the or whether or not the cruciate ligament is functioning well. Now, let's say that that wouldn't be the case. Let's say you would not have any swelling and the joint is completely okay, you don't have any pain anymore. Very unlikely, but let's say that's the case. Why would you even want to test that cruciate ligament in that specific time? Because it doesn't really give you any value unless you really don't trust the surgeon. If you feel like something went completely wrong and the cruciate ligament is not in place for some reason, then yeah, you could check it. But I would say the more logical approach would be to contact the surgeon, and whatever concern you might have of your knee not functioning the way that you would expect it to function, put those concerns forward to him and let him ease your mind, because he's actually looked inside that knee, and if something went wrong, he probably mentioned it to you anyway. So there probably isn't, but even if there is, it's more important to make sure that those concerns are being heard and the orthopedic surgeon can take action, or just set your mind at ease. Another thing, think back about the biodegradable screw that we talked about. Since it takes at least 6 weeks, it probably takes more time than that, but let's say it takes 6 weeks before the cruciate ligament is properly how to put this, properly fixed or put together with your own body. Since that takes a long time, you don't really want to test that anchor point, because let's say you're pulling it a little bit too hard and you're creating some wiggle space in that attachment. In my opinion, there is no good trade-off to do that test. There's many functional tests that you could do, which I don't see the point to those either. If you're at 4 weeks, you probably should have more patience, or talk to your therapist about what can be done. You should have a decent amount of range of motion, maybe a decent amount of control back in your muscles, but integral stability of the ACL and checking whether or not it's in place. There's not going to be a lot of value there. So I don't think you have to do it, and if you do it, there could potentially be downsides to that for sure. Okay, so the next question is from PO, and he or she says, I've got arthrosis in C5, C6, which are the neck, the fifth and the sixth vertebrae in the neck. Is swimming a good choice for me, or could it make things worse? My doctor told me I should start swimming, but I feel worse when I get out of the water. Okay, so this is a good question for the simple reason that it happens so many times that people have spine issues, they have either neck issues, upper back issues, lower back issues, and whenever they go to a doctor says you should start swimming, as if swimming is the number one form of exercise that's good for any type of back problem, and good for everybody, and it can never be bad. I disagree, because in most cases, if we look at spinal issues, and this is a bit of a generalization, but for the sake of the argument, a lot of spinal issues that have to do with the cartilage, arthrosis type or arthritis type injuries, have to do with too much compression on the spine, and that compression increases when the base of the skull comes closer to the base of the neck, so to speak. So we call this movement extension. We call this flexion. There's a lot of people that have problems with their joints that become more problematic when they go into extension. So whenever pressure increases, they get more problems. If you have an extension, so this type problem, and you start to swim, just picture that for a moment. How most people swim, most people aren't swimmers, right? So if you take a look at somebody who is a professional freestyle swimmer or whatever, they keep their neck in a neutral position, probably more for streamlining than for actual biomechanics or issues. But it doesn't matter for this example. If you end up swimming in a chest stroke sort of position, and you're in the water like this, what a lot of people are, obviously that's going to contribute and possibly make things worse because you're in that exact position that causes compression, which causes your problem. So the same thing applies to low back issues. If you have compression related low back issues, so if you're arching the back more and that gives you more pain, when you're laying down on the belly in the water and you're forcing your head to stay over the water, a lot of people end up swimming with their back entirely arched or curved. Most people don't know. They don't know what a good technique is, what a bad technique is, and a lot of people are not aware of how they're swimming. But again, obviously, if you have compression type problems and you end up swimming in the exact position that gives you problems, it's most likely making those things worse. So what you need to do is make sure that you go to a specialist, whether that's a personal trainer, a medical trainer, rehab trainer, physio, it doesn't really matter. Somebody who can make the distinction between different stimuli on different positions, and see if you actually have a compression based or an extension based problem. If that's the case, then swimming on your stomach is most likely not going to help unless you develop proper technique, which is worth it regardless. If you're going to do a lot of swimming, you may as well invest in having a proper technique for it, especially if you have issues. So, is swimming good for you? No, not necessarily. It depends on the type of problem you have and your technique. So, get somebody to check your back and spine and see if you actually have extension related issues. Then maybe that therapist can come with you to the pool for a session and check your technique when you're swimming. If it needs work, maybe set you up with a swimming instructor to work on that technique. And I'm pretty sure that if you do those things, it's probably going to be a lot better. Okay, so that's number 2. Okay. Miriam asks, which movement is good for you or not good for you when you are hypermobile? What do you think I can do if you have hypermobility and core instability? I've got a lot of pain daily, between 1 and 3 on a scale from 1 to 10. I'm doing a yoga and I'm doing steps. I assume that's some kind of cardio group class steps. I want to add body pump, which is a class which involves barbell exercises, strength, traditional strength exercise with music. And she walks about 10 kilometers every weekend. Okay. So I guess the question is, uh, what else can I do? Because she already has a pretty active lifestyle. I think first of all, it's important to note that I hear hypermobility a lot. In many of the cases, when I see people that do sessions with me and they say I have to be careful for this or this because I'm hypermobile, I check and they're just mobile, um, or they have a good range of motion in a certain joint and they're just uh, significantly less mobile or stiff in other joints. So the term hypermobile is being thrown around quite easily, I would say. Not many people are actually hypermobile, but the idea behind hypermobility is that the connective tissue around your joints allow more range of motion than you would normally expect. So think about people that can hyperextend their elbows. It's almost like they're double jointed. People used to think back in the days that that was an actual thing, that there were people that are somehow have joints that go both ways. It doesn't exist, but it's just that the connective tissue is so flexible that you can almost move both ways to a certain extent. When you're hypermobile, the idea is that it's genetic, so you can't do anything about this. Your body's just made this way. Everything is more lax, and you have to be careful because it's easy to overdo it on the joints. In my opinion, it comes down to this. It's not necessarily how far your joints can move, it's how well you can control the range of motion. So this means, do you know when you're overextending your shoulder? Do you know when you're overextending your elbows? Do you have good control in the entire range of motion of the elbow, and the same for the shoulder and the same for the hip? Awareness is key, because if you do a movement, so she does yoga, let's say there's a certain part of the class where they are in a plank position. For those that don't know, it's like a push-up position, but you don't go down. It's only like holding up. You can do it on the forearms or in the hands, doesn't really matter. If you're in that position and constantly you are overextending the elbow, but you don't know, yeah, of course, it's there's a big chance that the elbow is going to protest either during or after. But if you do know, then first of all, you have a good idea whether or not you can actually stabilize that position. That means, can you recruit the muscles around the joint to support the joint in the proper position with the proper tension? And can you change position? So usually you don't have to continuously overextend the elbow. If you're aware, you can just slightly bend it to change position, or slightly turn your arm another way, just to make sure that the pressure that ends up on the muscles under the joints changes. If you do that, then the chances of actually overloading a certain structure becomes less and less and less. So it comes down to the control, and depending on the type of teacher that you have during your yoga classes, he or she should be able to see whether or not you can control it. Now, if you're doing a pre-programmed class of yoga where there's like 30 people doing a certain sequence, yeah, it's very unlikely that the yoga teacher can individually look at your movements and tell you, be careful for that shoulder, be careful for the wrist, or whatever. So in this case, it comes down to you. If you're not aware, you don't know how far your elbow can go, you can't control it properly, and you don't have a teacher that can point that out to you, then something like yoga could be a problem, because you're constantly putting your joints into end range, because the goal is flexibility. But you already have flexibility. Actually, you have more flexibility than other people, and therefore it's probably quite easy for you, yoga, but it's also easy to overuse your joints. So it comes down to the following: be careful with things like yoga. Try to make sure that you know how far your joints can move, and focus on control. One, in my opinion, one of the best things to create more awareness and more stability in the joints, and condition the connective tissue around the joints, is to do gymnastics. And I'm not talking cartwheels and backflips and handstands. I am talking about a progressive system that leads you through different stability exercises, very fundamental stuff on which later on different movements are being built. So everyone that you see in the rings and on the parallettes and stuff, they don't start off that way. They start with controlling their own body, and then they move to more difficult versions. Now, if you want to try a system like that, I have a system that I use, and I can point you into the right direction. So feel free to send me a message, and I'll try to get you into the right direction. But I think it's a very, very valuable thing to add, and I would suggest maybe forget about body pump and maybe distribute or take that time and put that more towards being able to control your own body. Sorry, I'm just being a little bit distracted here. I need to go. Next time we'll be going over another 2 or 3 questions. We have what to do with a herniated disc. Um, we have another ACL issue. Do I have to have surgery or not? We have someone with a fractured foot. Can I run again? So these are interesting questions as well. I'll be going over those next time. If you have questions for me, feel free to send them in to info@markchenmovement.com or drop them below in the comments. I've got a couple of questions to work through, but I will get to you as fast as I can.